Welcome to the second session in our Growing Forward series in 2022. This one is focused on decision time, preparing for the risk factors of smoke and fire exposure in the vineyards. We have two parts of this webinar. The first one will be with Anita Oberholzer from UC Davis. She'll focus on the science of how smoke affects grapes and under which circumstances there's a higher risk and what can potentially be done so that vineyard managers and owners have an idea of what the risk factors are and what can be done. The second part will be with Adam Coble from Agrology and Rick Sloga from Emeritus Vineyards, and a conversation about how you can use data to create a plan of action and mitigate for when you potentially have smoke exposure. Now, this webinar is pre-recorded, but you can engage with the speakers. During the broadcast, we'll have speakers available in the live chat. So if you have any questions or want more in-depth information about anything being said, you can put your questions into the live chat and the speakers will be right there to answer them all throughout the broadcast. So no need to wait till the end, just ask away. These webinars wouldn't be possible without the support of our generous sponsors. This session is sponsored by agrology.ag as well as Turrentine Brokerage, and supported as well by Heffernan Insurance Brokers and QTAG Fire. You can visit their website and learn more about them through our event page. Now, to start it off, please welcome Anita Oberholzer from UC Davis. Thank you, Anita.
This session is sponsored by Agrology, the leading predictive agriculture company, and Turrentine Brokerage, rooted in relationships for over 45 years.
Thank you, Kim, for that introduction. And I want to remind everybody that you can enter questions in the chat as we're broadcasting this presentation, and I'll be in the chat answering your questions to the best of my ability. So next, let me talk about managing wildfire smoke risk in the vineyard. And you'll see I have there in brackets and winery, because the vineyard and the winery is very interconnected. And I do feel it's really important that both sides understand the issue that the other side is facing as far as this issue is concerned. I mean, the thing is, wildfires aren't going away. There's general agreement that the frequency and intensity of wildfires may continue to increase. And obviously, with extreme weather conditions, that risk just gets amplified. And with the continued drought, it means we have more and more fuel out there that can burn. So we need to be ready, and we need to understand what we are facing, because understanding is half of the battle. Knowing what the problem is helps you feel more empowered and helps you make more informed decisions. So first, I want to start explaining what is smoke taint, because we've all heard about smoke taint. Now, smoke taint is actually a sensory term. When we talk about taint, we talk about something that overpowers a wine and decreases its quality, basically making it one-dimensional. So in the case of smoke, this is where on the nose you have overpowering, smoky, burnt, campfire, medicinal, earthy, can also be barbecue, bacon characters. And in the palate, we call it a retronasal flavor, or many people talk about a taste, but it's not really a taste. Is this old campfire, licking an ashtray kind of character at the back of your throat. Now, that is what I see as distinctive smoke taint. Everything else can be caused by other things as well. There's other characters that can give smokiness, including barrel aging. And some of these medicinal bread-like characters can come from Brettanomyces and other bacteria and things that could be in wine. So for me, that retronasal ashtray character, that's smoke taint. Now, when I talk about grapes and smoke exposure in the vineyard, we call that potential smoke impact. A berry by itself isn't tainted. It's anyway very difficult to taste smoke taint in a berry because they have so much sugar in it. There's a potential impact. If that impact is high enough, that may result in a wine that may develop a taint. And I hope that really defines the difference between these terms. So let me explain the science behind smoke impact. Now, when you have a wildfire, there's a lot of vegetation burning. If you look here at the bottom, you'll see 15 to 25% of wood consists of lignin. Now, lignin is what gives wood its structure. If you think of a celery stick and you chew it, that crunchiness, that is lignin. If you look at the structure of lignin here on the left, you'll see it's a very complex structure. And when it burns, you get thermal degradation. Basically, it breaks down in its individual parts. And you'll get a lot of these ring structures released with an OH group on top of it. That and the simple basis is a phenol. Now, you can have different substitutions on the phenol, which will specify what type of phenol it is. So in this instance, everybody has heard of guaiacol. That is the structure for guaiacol. Now, say you have fresh smoke and you have a vineyard that's close by, and this vineyard is now engulfed in smoke with a lot of free volatile phenols that's been released. Now, a grape berry, unfortunately, is a little bit like a sponge. And if there's high concentrations of small molecules, volatile molecules in the air, it can absorb into the grape berry. It doesn't sit on the outside, it actually absorbs into the skin itself. So there's your example of your volatile phenol and guaiacol. It will go inside the skin. Now, we think this is part of the defense mechanism of the plant. There are glycosyl transferase enzymes, and they can actually attach sugars to these volatile phenols. And it's a way to detoxify the plant against these foreign elements coming in. Now, the complexing factor here is that for each volatile phenols, the grape can attach various different sugars to it. And it can attach 1 sugar, 2 sugars, or 3 sugars. So now you understand it's becoming more and more complex. Now, this can happen in the berry itself, but it can also happen in the leaf. So both of these can absorb volatile phenols and glycosylate them. We do not see absorption really taking place in the shoots. Now, these are the 7 main volatile phenols: guaiacol, 4-methyl-guaiacol, 4-methyl-serigol, para, meta, ota, cresol. Now, Australians have been really working on this issue for about 10 to 15 years longer than us here in the US. And we're building upon the information they already gathered. And they've shown that these 7 compounds do correlate with smoke taint development in wine. But these are only 7. Many of us screen for way more than this. We're always looking for more marker compounds to improve our ability to predict smoke risk assessment. But you can think if all of these can have various different up to tri sugars, this is a huge number of potential bound compounds that can be in grapes as well. Another thing is both the free and the bound compounds can be naturally present in grapes. So you can't just analyze your grapes and say, oh, I have guaiacol, so I'm smoke impacted. No. It's naturally there at low levels, but still it's there. So the problem is also we know different grape varieties have different amounts of volatile phenols naturally present, both free and bound. So you need to know what's naturally present in your grapes before you can know what the smoke impact was. So that's another complicating factor. Something else to remember is, as soon as any oak contact happened, so as soon as grapes have been crushed and it's in the winery and anybody added any kind of oak, it will impact your free number, and your free number doesn't mean anything because oak will release a lot of free volatile phenols. At this point of time, we do not believe they contribute to any of the bound, but definitely to the free. And when somebody says they use a neutral barrel, meaning something that they don't believe extract any more volatile phenols, they will be wrong. Just because you don't taste that anymore or can't smell it anymore, the analytical equipment measure these compounds at parts per billion level. That's microgram per liter level. For an analytical instrument, there's no such thing as neutral oak. So that's just something to remember. Now, unfortunately, this is that kind of situation you can have. This could be your free, the tip of the iceberg, and this could be your bound. So this is my concern. When you only analyze 3, you might only getting the tip of the iceberg. Now, this ratio is not constant. We do not know what governs this ratio. It seems to be all over the place. But we know perhaps it's possible the timing of exposure to smoke can have an impact in this, but we know glycosylation happens really quickly within hours of smoke exposure. But this is something I just want you to keep in mind, because I'm going to keep hammering on the fact that you can't analyze just free. You need to look at the bound forms as well. This is probably the most common question I get is about risk. What is my risk? And it is very, very difficult to answer. Now, at this stage, I would say the fresher the smoke, and when we talk about fresh smoke, we mean 24 hours, less than 24 hours old, the greater your risk. Now, air quality indexes measure ozone, they measure particulate matter, both 10 micron and 2.5 micron. Smoke taint risk is based on volatile phenols. They're really, really small. You can't see them with the naked eye. And actually in air, they break down within hours. However, they can absorb onto debris and other particulate matter and distribute that way as well. And that can impact their degradation. So we are looking into this. We're currently working with atmospheric scientists to be able to do better predictions based on smoke movement and to be able to predict better whether you have a risk or not, and perhaps even figure out what is a safe distance from a fire. But it depends on topography, it depends on wind direction, it depends on a lot of different factors. So I would say this, AQI has some relation to risk, but only when that smoke is really fresh. After that, it doesn't. And you know, the problem is like in 2020, when there were fires everywhere, later on, you had no idea what was old smoke and what was new smoke. So this is why at this point, unfortunately, we have to tell people, if you have some smoke in your vineyard, you better test, because there may be some risk, but I can't tell you what that risk is. There's a study in Australia, that a really good study that they did over 3 years, where they looked at Merlot vines that they intentionally smoked, and they smoked them at different key growth stages, right? Front 10 centimeter shoot, flowering pea-sized berries, beginning of bunch closure, very eyes-on, grapes with intermediate sugar, berries not quite ripe, harvest. And what they found was that the berries were the most susceptible after variation, after color change, to smoke exposure. Not susceptible earlier, most susceptible from variation. The fact is, if there's a berry on the vine, they can absorb smoke. But it seems after variation, we have the berry softening and you have the larger berry giving a bigger area to absorb onto, you do get more absorption taking place. And I can tell you now in Australia, they have often their smoke exposure much earlier in the season. And they've had now plenty of examples where they had vineyards only exposed to smoke at rock hard pea size, and it still resulted in smoke impacted wines. So be aware of that. If you have a berry on the vine, you need to be concerned. The silver lining here is there is no carryover of smoke-related compounds from one season to the next. I've heard things about it's in the root system or it's in the, I don't know where, it's in the soils. That's not true, okay? It's in the leaves, it's in the grape bunches. They don't overwinter. Next year, you start fresh. Obviously, if your vines themselves were damaged, right? Say the fire ran through them or they got really, really hot. Obviously, then there can be some dieback or there can be an impact on yield. But as far as smokiness goes, no, it doesn't linger anywhere. Next year is a new year. Now, what about mitigation in the vineyard? Now, as I said before, these compounds are inside the berry. They're not on the outside. So washing grapes have no impact whatsoever. But what about the role of ash? I did say that the volatile phenols can absorb onto debris like ash. And if you have fresh ash raining down on your vineyard, is that a problem? Now, we collected ash in 2020 from our own vineyards here, and it did release volatile phenols for up to a week. But remember, this is us putting it in like a GCMS vial, a small glass vial. You shake it at 50 degrees Celsius and analyze it. In an open atmosphere, is that enough to actually force passive absorption into berry? I'm not sure. And the other thing is, if you do try and wash the ash off, wet ash gives off more volatile phenols than dry ash. So now you wash it off onto the canopy floor and it's releasing volatile phenols. So did you even gain anything? And to wash off ash is very difficult. Sometimes you just force it into the bunches. So I'm not sure it's worth it. We did do this little experiment in 2020, or 2021, I should say, where we tried to make ash that gives similar volatile phenols than what we observed in the natural ash we collected in 2020. And we sprinkled it on the bunches, like a gram per bunch. That is excessive. And we folded it in these nut bags. And we exposed it for 4 hours, 1, 3, and 7 days. We've analyzed the 7 days, and I can tell you that there was no impact at all that we could see. Okay, so I think it's going to be very difficult to have enough ash there to really change the atmosphere around your berry enough to cause more absorption of volatile phenols. Now, the thing that I'm not sure of, what if you have fresh ash raining down and you're harvesting so that you can process them as quickly as possible? Now, it's possible that if there's enough volatile phenols on that ash, that it will dissolve from the ash into the wine during the winemaking process. Then, it's difficult to wash off in the vineyard. Perhaps if a winery has the capacity to rinse off the ash, it's worthwhile. Again, wet ash will give off more volatile phenols. The grapes are still breathing. They can absorb it if it's there. Would it make a difference in an open atmosphere? I am not sure. Perhaps you want to use a leaf blower and see if you can blow the ash off. At this point in time, I'm really not sure that it would make any kind of impact. It's just one of those things that we're not certain of, but I will continue looking into the issue. Other mitigation things in the vineyard that we're looking into. So first, let me talk about some of the studies that have been done. So the first one was done in Australia. They looked at kaolin, better known here as surround, the clay we spray on grapes sometimes for sunburn. And they found some efficacy on Merlot grapes, but not on Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay. Now, that's a little bit weird. Why would it help for one and not for the other? So when I talked to the Australians, they said, well, if you apply it in the vineyard, you only get about 30 to 40% coverage. And then perhaps they didn't specifically study it, but they're assuming that perhaps they got better coverage in the Merlot than in the Sauvignon Blanc and in the Chardonnay due to the canopy system, and that's why it performed better in the Merlot. Well, that was their opinion. Then there was a study done by British Columbia, the University of British Columbia, where they looked at a biofilm called Parka. So this is like a phospholipid cuticle to prevent cracking in cranberries. Now, they did intentional smoking on Pinot Noir, and they applied this a week before the smoking. And, everybody was, whoa, they saw a 300% reduction in volatile phenol marker compounds compared to those that didn't have the barrier on and was exposed to smoke. The problem is they repeated the study and it didn't show good results at all when they actually did it, I think, 1 day prior. And when they did it 1 day prior, they did say that there was high humidity and they think it may not have gotten dry. In the same experiments, when they looked at the biofilms, they also sprayed with different fungicides. Now, many of these sprays contain stickers, and these stickers are often oils. And if there's high enough oil concentrations in there, they may not dry on the vine. And we think that if you put something wet on the berry, it's firstly increasing the surface area of the berry, giving them a bigger surface area for the volatile phenols to absorb onto, but it may be dissolving into this liquid layer outside of the berry, getting concentrated there, and then going into the berry. Because in some cases, it's actually been making it worse. In this biofilm study, the fungicides actually allowed the absorbance of more volatile phenols. So we're very concerned. Do not put stuff on your grapes when there's smoke in the air. Please don't. If you want to apply something to try and prevent smoke absorption, it's a preventative thing. You have to do it before there's any smoke in the air, just in case. And if you need to apply fungicides and other things, try and avoid doing anything until the air clears. We really think it's not a smart idea to put anything wet on your berry while there's smoke in the air. We do think timing of application, because all these studies varied from 1 week to 1 day before application. The other thing is, these studies seem to show that you need to remove the barrier spray. So it seems what happens is, whatever you're putting on the outside of the berry, that is actually absorbing the volatile phenols. So it's not balancing it off. It's actually absorbing onto this barrier. So now if you harvest the grapes and you make wines from it, it gets desorbed from this barrier into the wine. So you actually have to remove the barrier, which is also a problem, obviously, because imagine it's not that easy to remove these things, and it will take a lot of water. So in 2021, we did this screening trial. I've had a lot of people sending me things that they think are the next solution for smoke impact. So I said, okay, fine. So I had 12 different potential barrier treatments. And what I did here is I actually dipped bunches in these barrier sprays. 100% efficacy. Because if you're not going to show me any reduction in volatile phenols with 100% efficacy, I'm not going to bother doing a very expensive and laborious field trial. We applied them and then waited 3 days in like 85 plus weather to make sure they're all dry. Then expose it to medium smoke. I didn't do excessive smoke. It's only 2 hours of smoke using a smoker. We waited 1 week. We harvested them and we rinsed all the berry sprays off before analysis. This was per bunch level, so it was only an analytical analysis. This is the result. Now, it was only low to medium smoke. So you can see the free and bound volatile phenols only increased about 50 to 90%. Now look here at the left. Buffer NS, that means it was a buffer vine that was outside the smoking tent, no smoke. Right? That's normal. That's baseline values. This is all the different volatile phenols I analyzed added together. Then if you look here next to it, it's control S, meaning that's a control vine or bunches that got no barrier sprays and was exposed to smoke. So basically what you want is you want to see, is any of these bringing it back to the buffer vines? Now, if you only look at the free, there seems to be a few candidates. However, if you look at the bound or the total here at the right, so that's free and bound together, it doesn't look quite as good. So if we go to the next slide, this is just the totals. And you'll see nothing brought it back to the level of no smoke, but there's some improvements. Here's the main one. Cowlin, actually, like other studies found, had like a 31% reduction. Then one of the treatments I tried, this one, GM3E barrier, is a polymer-based plant protection from EMP. I think they use it for powdery mildew. And all of these are organic, if anybody is concerned about that. That was about a 33% reduction. Now, yes, activated charcoal also gave a 30% reduction. That was my reference because activated charcoal absorbs everything. I am not recommending that anybody spray activated charcoal on their bunches. It is black, it's dark, it's going to absorb all the heat. You don't want to do that. Then things like cyclodextrin and some of the other GM products also showed some reduction. I think this one, but at much higher concentrations. For me, Cowlin and GM3 shows the best. Now, think about this. This was 100% coverage, and you still only got a 30% reduction. These sprays aren't going to be a silver bullet. These are things, there's going to be little things that we can do to reduce the absorption of volatile phenols. That when you only had low levels exposure, it may be enough that you're not impacted. It's not going to be you're surrounded by fire and there's something that is like a silver bullet and you're not impacted. I don't think we're going to get that. But I do think there's a lot of little things we can find that we can do to limit the impact. And under low level impact, you may be fine. This year, we're doing field trials with Cowlin and GM3. And we're specifically focusing on how often do you need to apply it and how quickly does it break down? Do we need to wash it off, or is there a period of time you need to wait for it to naturally degrade? And so those are the questions we're looking at this season. So what happens during winemaking? When you crush your fruit, as I said, they're mostly in the skin, very highly concentrated in the skins. About 80% of those volatile phenols will extract within the first 5 days at room temperature. They're very hydrophilic, meaning they like water. They're glycosylated, meaning they have sugars on them, so they extract very easily. They don't need alcohol to extract. Now, in the beginning, when you crush that fruit, there are enzymes within the cells of the grape berry that can hydrolyze some of these glycosides to the free form. So in the beginning, there's this release of some of the bound to the free. But as soon as the alcohol production really increases, those enzymes get inhibited mostly. So then what you get is really only a very slow hydrolysis that happens during the lifetime of the wine due to the fact that wine pH is quite low, somewhere between 3.2 to 4. But that hydrolysis seems to be really slow, like 10, 15% over years. So what we saw is up to like post-malolactic fermentation, we get about a 25 to 30% decrease of the bound to the free. Now, both free and bound volatile phenols contribute to smoke taint perception. So in the beginning, there was this misconception that, so long as it's staying in the bound, it's fine. No, how it works is the free you can smell, the bound you can't, right? Because they're not aromatic. But as soon as I get released, you can. So what happens is we have enzymes in our saliva that can hydrolyze the bound to free. So as we taste the wine, they get released, and we retronasally, the back of our throat, where our nose is connected to our throat, we can smell the released volatile phenols. And we think that is a big part of that really bad ashtray character we get, is the release of this bound to free. It's definitely contributing to that strongly. The other thing is we know there's huge matrix effects. When I talk about matrix effects, I say everything other than the volatile phenols in the wine also have an impact on how those volatile phenols are perceived. So sometimes people would look at odor threshold levels. People go and take an individual volatile phenol and they go and put it in some other solution and say, at this concentration, people can see it. Now, for something like guaiacol, it's close to something like over 20 micrograms per liter. I can tell you at 2 micrograms per liter, guaiacol can give you smoke impact. So the fact is, these compounds don't work in isolation. All these volatile phenols, both free and bound, have a synergistic impact. They add together, and at low levels, they can strengthen each other so that they can result in an impact, even though it's below each of their individual odor threshold levels. Okay. And things like green character in wine can uplift the perception of smoke impact with things like a lot of fruity aromas, a lot of tannin, a lot of anthocyanins can actually suppress it. 3 grams per liter of sugar can actually suppress that hydrolysis in the mouth a little bit, and higher alcohols, around 14-15% alcohol, can also inhibit it a little bit. So what I'm also trying to say is you can sometimes have 2 wines with exactly the same volatile phenol composition of what we are measuring in any case, and the expression of the smoke impact can be very, very different. So it's a very, very complex issue. I do want to just quickly talk about, okay, so what you've delivered your grapes to the winery, what can a winery actually do? Now, if they know that there's been smoke impact, we do recommend for white wines, handpicking, which isn't always possible. For some people, economically, it's just not possible. Labor-wise, not possible. But why do we say that? We say that because it's mostly in the skins. And if you do have machine harvesting, you get some damage of the skins. And as soon as you have damage, they would start leaching into the juice. So you're going to get more extraction of the volatile phenols. But sometimes that's unavoidable. You can sometimes still make a really good white wine, even though there's smoke impact, but probably in the low level, not at the high levels. They can't handle, because white wines are a much simpler matrix than, for instance, a full-bodied red. they can't handle as much of the marker compounds. The same for red wine. People say make a rosé. True, you could make a rosé with much less skin contact, but the same thing, much simpler matrix like for white wines, so it won't be able to handle as much of the marker compounds. And also, obviously, for something like an Alpha Cab, a rosé doesn't make any kind of economic sense. They can't sell it for the same value. For red wines, I say, if you're going to make a red wine, you can just as well make the best wine you can. We've tried different fermentation temperatures, they extract. If you're going to have a standard 5 to 7 day skin contact, no matter what your fermentation temperature is, they're going to come out. We looked, you can do things like have neutral or lightly toasted oak that doesn't have any smoky characters or things like that. Remind me of that, but would uplift the fruit. It can help. You can use yeast that can uplift the fruit, but what is the best yeast really depends on the grape. There's nothing we can specifically say would be the best under every circumstance. You can use your little things and it can help, but it's mostly a masking effect. So the duration of the masking is what's problematic. It usually comes back after a while if there's real smoke there. We do recommend keeping press fractions separate. So when you have that mechanical force of pressing, you do press more of the volatile phenols out of the skin so that you can treat those wines separately, if at all. And treatment, we looked at treatment options. I did this, and at that stage, we were looking at enzyme treatments, anything that's available in the wine industry and in the food industry, to try and cleave all the bound to the free, because it's much easier to remove the free. The bound have high molecular weights and they fall in a molecular weight ranges where there's a lot of other good compounds in wine. So if you start aiming for them, you're really stripping your wine totally. And then we also did fining. Activated charcoal fining, the Australians have found does work. Once again, the problem is it strips wine in general. I also looked at molecular imprinted polymers. This is from a company in New Zealand. And basically, it's a polymer that you make with a template molecule. So say your template molecule is a volatile phenol. It leaves cavities within this polymer matrix that looks like your template molecule. It's a little bit like the lock and key idea. So it gets trapped. The molecule gets trapped into this polymer. It does not have experimental use in the US yet. We're working on it. Then reverse osmosis. And then spinning cone technology. At that stage, they were actually doing smoke treatments. I don't think they do anymore. But I'm not going to bore you with data, but to summarize is we could not find an enzyme that could effectively remove all the bound to free. They seem to have some efficacy for the monoglycosides, but that's it. And unfortunately, most of the bound is actually in the diglycoside form. And they do seem to get inhibited by the wine, by the alcohol. Then other treatments, they do work, but they mostly remove free, not bound. And you want to treat as little as possible because it really does strip the wine. It takes color away, it takes aroma away, it takes tannins and body away. So you end up, even when you remove the smoke, you do not have the quality wine that you had before smoke. You have reduced the quality because it lacks specificity. So what we're currently doing is we're trying to engineer enzymes to be very, very specific and actually only split the glycosides from volatile phenols so that they're all in free form. And then we're trying to improve resins so that they can target focus only on those volatile phenols and only remove what you need to remove so that you're back in the normal range of what should be in wine, and so that they can never over the lifetime of the wine develop smoke taint. Well, that's the aim, and that's what we're currently working on. And people do talk about flash deterrent. I don't know if everybody's familiar with flash deterrent. It's a French technology. There's some facilities here, custom crush facilities that use flash deterrent. Basically, you put your grapes, you heat it up to 85 degrees. It's under a vacuum, and it causes massive amount of extractions. And because of this, you do have a condensate that forms that they collect. They call it the flash water. And some of your volatile phenols get trapped there, but very, very little. Why seems to help for smoke impact is more masking because you get so much fruit coming out, so much tannin, so much anthocyanins. I think it's a masking effect because the numbers doesn't look that different whether you flush or not. How long the masking lasts is what I'm not sure about. And it does make wines very similar to me and removes varietal character a little bit. So I really do not think this is a solution for everybody. I did want to talk about testing. I do get a lot of questions regarding how does the test work? How do I interpret my tests? What lab should I go to? And obviously, I'm not here to push any specific lab, so I'm not going to tell you what labs to go to. But I will explain to you what tests are available and what they will tell you. So first, let's talk about free volatile phenols. Now, crop insurance currently only requests that you analyze for guaiacol and for methyl guaiacol. But I really, really want to push you to actually analyze for more than that, because that is not very indicative. And like I mentioned before, if you think of that iceberg slide that I showed, sometimes your free forms, your guaiacol and 4-methyl guaiacol, can be 0, and you can have massive amounts of bound there. So I recommend doing the full panel of free, and then also measuring the bound. Now, there's different ways of measuring the bound. So the free is measured by a gas chromatographer mass spectrometer. Many labs often will offer free and total. Now, what's total? Total is when they take that same sample they just analyzed free on, and they release all the bound, or try to release all the bound to the freeform. There's different ways to do this. So if you look here on the right, you can do it through enzymes or acid. Now, almost everybody uses the acid. It gives you higher yields than the enzyme. So basically what you do is you adjust the pH of that sample to a pH of 1. Then you heat it to 100 degrees Celsius for 1 hour. And then you measure all the free. Okay, so that gives you a total number, because this is now supposed to be what was free and everything that was released from the bound added to that. So if you subtract the free from the total, you should get your estimated bound. Now, something to remember. The free forms are pretty stable under these conditions. So no, they're not going to really deteriorate. We've done tests on that. However, the bound standards we do have, I can tell you some of them hydrolyze 80% under these conditions, and others hydrolyze at 30% under these conditions. So it's not a 100% accurate measure of everything that's there, but it gives you an indication, a broad indication of what's there, and it still has value. Why many labs offer these is because you can use the same piece of equipment for these analysis. It's the same technician, as way cheaper. I think it's about $150 for these kind of analysis. Now, there are labs that's analyzing the individual bound. Now, they're only measuring 6, and I've listed them here. And why only 6? Because if you can think about it, there's many more potential compounds. Some researchers measure up to 42 compounds. They're measuring these 6 because these are the 6 we have reference standards for that you can buy commercially, so you can run a calibration curve and you can actually give somebody a quantitative number. Okay, so they can very accurately measure these 6, but that's it. Now, these 6 have been shown by the Australian Wine Research Institute to correlate to smoke taint in wine. So that's true. But we do not know for sure that these are the only 6 that's important. So with individual bound, you get very accurately 6 bound compounds. With total, you get more a broader idea of what's potentially there. It's not the same value. Now, I've been doing both, and so far, it looks like the values correlate, which is good. So if you have a wine that is high, it's high by total, and it's high by individual bound, which is good news. So I think both have value. You need to decide what lab you want to use and stick to that lab. Don't go and use different methods, because you're going to get different numbers and you can't directly correlate them with each other. And also the individual bound is way more expensive, although a very good number. Also, people would sometimes send me data from different labs. Now, you have to be careful. When we analyze wines, they're very simple. Their sample prep is very simple. But when you have grapes, it gets tricky. It all depends about the sample prep of their grapes, right? And the condition of the grapes when it got there. Because remember, the moment your grapes start softening or breaking apart, there's enzymes in the grapes that will start releasing the bound to the free. So that bound to free number is changing as it goes to the lab, if it's not a solid frozen sample. Then how long do they take before they start analyzing that sample? In my lab, we homogenize, we make a smoothie, and we extract the whole smoothie because that gives you the highest levels. Most labs centrifuge that smoothie and only analyze the juice. How much contact time it has with the skins will also have an influence. If it's 10 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour, that would have an influence on your final number. So that's why I recommend stick to one lab so that your data is comparable with each other. So something else I do want to highlight is labs are ISO accredited, but this means something like this. So labs only analyze a single sample. So what they do is, say they have a set that they're running, they would have QC samples, quality control samples. This is samples that they know what the concentration of the compounds are, and they have to analyze it and make sure that those concentrations come back within a certain acceptable margin of error. Now, that acceptable margin of error is many times 5%. Now, what does 5% mean? 5% means that if you send them a lab sample and they send you a number that says 2 micrograms per liter, that has the same meaning as 1.9 and 2.1 micrograms per liter, because this is all within 5%. So this is the problem with a hard deadline of, I only accept samples up to 2 micrograms per liter. Well, 2.1 and 2 actually is the same value in this instance. So just keep that in mind. Also, when you reanalyze stuff and think it's different, how different is it? It needs to be like more than 5% different to tell me that it's actually different. Grape sampling. So what we recommend is to take a sample close to harvest. Why we say this is, we know volatile phenols are naturally present in grapes. So they get by synthesizing grapes. And we aren't really sure how that changes during ripening. We're investigating that at the moment. Now, obviously, the problem is there's always a risk of smoke exposure. And when the smoke is in the air, it's too late to take a grape sample. So I recommend from Variazon every 2 weeks, take a grape sample, throw it in the freezer. And then if there's a smoke event, you have a baseline. We don't have a public baseline yet for California. Then you have a baseline for your grapes, because how are you supposed to evaluate a number from the lab if you don't know what's normal? Then you can compare it with your own grapes. Now, good sample is you need at least 300 berry sample or 300 gram sample, but it needs to be representative, meaning you need to take upper, mid, bottom of a cluster, inside the canopy, outside of the canopy, to represent a block, at least 40 different vines, right? It really, really needs to be representative. There's a lot of variability. If I measure 3 different clusters from the same vine, I will get 3 different values. If I measure the top, the middle, and the bottom of a cluster, I get 3 different values, and significantly different values. So that's how important it is that your sample should be representative. Okay. And also, even when you send samples away for analysis, please keep extra in your freezer. I have so many people contacting me because they now are in litigation. They only did alcohol for methyl alcohol. It's not enough information. I need to know the bound to prove where the smoke exposure took place. They have no backup samples, nothing to go back to. I can't help you then. So really, really, really do extended panels, both free and bound. And if you don't want to do it beforehand because it's really expensive, have extra sample in the freezer that you can do it later if you need to do it. Small scale winemaking. So why do we recommend small scale winemaking? So we did this in 2020 because, you know, the labs were inundated. People had to wait 6 weeks for data. You couldn't make any harvest decisions because you're not going to have any numbers in time. So we have this protocol that's available online, and I even made a little video about how to do the small scale fermentations. Now, the thing is, crop insurance, like I mentioned, at this stage, look at alcohol for methyl alcohol. But I'm really concerned because in grapes, those numbers can be low and you can have a load in the bound form. If you go and make a small scale wine, some of that bound will get released during the winemaking, and that will increase your free glycol and methyl glycol values. And that may allow you to get crop insurance. And crop insurance has said that they will work with those numbers. You just have to prove, chain of custody, that that fermentation is actually representative of a specific block, because they need a number per variety, per block of a variety. And so that's just important to be able to show that. And then you can taste it. It makes for a much better conversation between a grape grower and a winemaker. You can taste these wines. Now, it is possible that a wine doesn't taste like smoked tank yet, directly after primary fermentation. It can evolve later. That does happen, but that's usually low impact. If you have medium to high impact, you should be able to perceive it at the end of primary fermentation. So just a quick thing about sensory. 20 to 25% of people aren't sensitive to smoke, okay? And that could be you. It could be that trusted winemaker. It can be anybody, believe me, and they may not know it. So it's really important to screen people. I have some high impacted wines here. So if anybody doesn't have some really bad smoke tainted wines, I can give you some and you can use it as a reference. Otherwise, you can make your own reference. Elizabeth Thomasina developed this reference where they basically take the leafy part of leeks, 500 degrees, until it's charcoal in the oven, and you extract it in water and put it through a coffee filter. It tastes disgusting, but it has that ashtray character if you want to make your own standard to be able to test people. Absolutely, the more people, the better, right? I say 5 or more. You want an uneven number. People's sensitivity for this taint is very, very different, even if they're sensitive. It has to be blind. If people know what they're tasting, they imagine they taste smoke everywhere. It has to be blind. It has to be in randomized. Somebody that isn't tasting needs to put those samples together. Carryover is a huge issue. If you just tasted the smoke impacted wine and you just go on tasting, everything after that is going to taste smoke impacted. There's a huge carryover. We rinse our mouths with water and wait 2 minutes. It's not fast. I understand that. If you want to cut down that wait time, you can take a dextrose solution. You can take glucose, just normal table sugar, 4 grams per liter in a solution, rinse with that. It cuts down that time a little bit to about 90 minutes, perhaps 60 minutes if the impact wasn't great, but I would say 90 minutes, 90 seconds. 90 seconds, just to get that impact a little bit lower. And I do not rate the nose at all, okay? The nose, it is possible for it to have a smokiness based on something else. Bread-like characters can be from smoke, but it can be from bacteria and other stuff. Really only focus on that ashtray retronasal character. That is always there. Some smoke impacted wine has nothing on the nose and it's all there because they don't have much tray. So only focus on the ashtray in the mouth. It's simplified things and you know that you're only rating smoke impact and nothing else. Okay, so what are we doing to try and help grape growers and winemakers? Trying to develop more robust comparable methods. We're trying to develop low-cost sensors that we can put in a vineyard so that we can say and then relate that to atmospheric conditions and say, yes, you have a risk, no, you don't have a risk. So that everybody don't have to go and do expensive analysis, only those at risk have to do that. That project just started, so you have to be patient for another few years. We're also looking at things like fluorescence, spectrophotometry to actually see if we could do a fast throughput analytical method that can tell you yes, no for risk, and only if you have a risk, then you have to do the very expensive analytical measurements, but we only started with that. But the other thing we're doing is what I call the 2 buckets. Trying to do baseline data for our main varieties in California. We only started this last year. I'm working with Sue Ebler on this for the 7 main varieties in California. And then we're trying to determine, okay, this is baseline. So then you know what is elevated. And how much of elevation do you need before it starts impacting the quality of the wine that you're making from it negatively? Now, for that, we're unfortunately going to have to do a lot because I think it's not just going to be per variety, it's also going to be per wine style. So this year, we're doing 2 Cabernet Sauvignons, a medium-bodied and a full-bodied, to see how much of these additional smoke marker compounds can they handle before the quality is impacted as perceived by consumers and wine professionals. So this is what we would like to do. This is baseline data from Australia, specifically here for Shiraz. If you look here, there's that little dot. That is mean baseline. If your sample comes back like this compared to baseline, your risk is very, very low, close to zero. Now, if your data come back like this, that blue triangle, well, you're above baseline for everything. That's a pretty high risk. Now, if your levels come back like this, so your baseline, but your elevated baseline, if you don't have your own personal baseline data as well to know that naturally your grapes is there, then that still tell you have some risk. So it's still good to have your own personal baseline for your vineyard as well, because there are going to be huge ranges. Then in 2021, this is what we did, and we'll do more of this in 2022. We actually picked grapes and we intentionally smoke them on drying tables. And so we make wines from intentionally smoked grapes, and the same grapes, not smoked. So exactly the same grapes, we make the wines exactly the same way. We do serial dilutions with the smoke abate wines, and then do threshold studies on them to try and determine what kind of volatile phenol marker compound composition results in a decrease of quality, to try and work out those threshold levels, the upper end of the bookend for you. And we did a lot of studies in 2020, 2021, trying to relate small scale to larger scale wines. They correlate. So if I tell you to do small scale winemaking, yes, it does correlate with the commercial. You actually get more extraction in the really small, these as nice micro scale, that is in Bodum coffee presses, because you get better skin contact. So my take home message, I think I've taken quite a while. I think the most important thing I want to highlight too is make sure what your decision tree is before harvest, before there is a smoke event, right? Are you taking samples? Where are you going to store those samples? I highly recommend getting a chest freezer, right? Put ice cream in it if you don't use it, but put grape samples in there in case you need it. Talk to your winery. Who's taking grape samples, right? Who's going to pay for testing? Are testing going to be done? Are you going to make small scale wines? Who's going to evaluate those wines? Are those people trained? Have they been screened for sensitivity to smoke, right? A grape grower needs to be involved in this process, and you need to be around the table when they're evaluating your wines so that you can be there and see what they're talking about. Sort out these things now. Don't wait until there is a crisis. Make sure you understand your contract with the winery. Make sure you understand your crop insurance contracts. They're all slightly different. I do know if there's any smoke in your vineyard, they want you to, within 24 hours, it's a very short period, to open a claim. You don't have to finish the claim if there ends up not being an impact, but you just need to open the claim. Just do that. I recommend taking samples, keeping that so you have pre and post smoke if you need them. Please do both free and bound volatile phenols. Stick to one method and one lab if possible. I understand it's not always possible. Make wines if you can. It's going to give you a better number if you need to get crop insurance. Screen tasters. And yes, unfortunately, it's true. It is true that sometimes there will be wine that even directly after primary fermentation do not have any smoke impact, and they develop it 6 months later. It does unfortunately happen. We don't know whether it's due to free and bound ratios changing, or it's because the phenolics and the fruity character starts decreasing with aging, and the smoke just have the opportunity to stand out more. Something else that do happen is soft threshold smoke. So that is when something doesn't actually taste like smoke, but there's still a quality impact. It means the fruit is muted. There's like a hole in the mid palate. It's a weird astringency at the tip of the tongue and a weird bitterness at the end. Now, that's something you can only evaluate if you know the fruit really well and you've been making wine from the same vineyard for several seasons. Then you could see that a sub-threshold smoke. If you're tasting blind somebody else's vineyard, you can't do that because there's many other things that can also cause those kind of issues. I just want to put that out there as well. Then I would just like to thank our sponsors, because we're not able to do any of this work without money. Like I mentioned, the American Vineyard Foundation has been supporting us to obtain baseline data, but also a lot of the work that I've talked about has come from the Wildfire Relief Fund through the USDA, which I need to be very, very thankful for. Also, the sensor network I'm talking about, some of the threshold work we're doing. This is all through a multi-state grant, a NEFA SCRI CAP grant that I'm doing with Washington State University and the Oregon State University. And with that, I want to thank everybody. There's some resources in this last slide, and I am handing it back over to Kim.
Thank you, Anita. That was a lot of great information. I hope everybody enjoyed that as much as I did. You can continue putting your questions into the live chat and continue the discussion there, but we will take about a 10-minute break before we start the second part of this webinar at 10 minutes past 10. You'll see a countdown timer on the screen, so you don't have to go anywhere. You can just see how long before we start again. So we'll be back with Adam Coble and Rick Sloga from Emeritus Vineyards to talk about making a plan and using data to mitigate for your fire exposures. Thank you. Welcome back to the second half of the Growing Forward webinar. This part is focused on how to use data to make a plan and take actions to mitigate for potential smoke exposure. We have Adam Koppel from agrology.ag here as part of this, as well as Rick Loka from Emeritus Vineyards. Before we start, I just want to reiterate that these webinars are pre-recorded, but you can ask your questions in the live chat. The speakers are available during the broadcast live to answer your questions, so no need to wait till the end. Just put your questions in the live chat and we'll answer them right in there immediately. Now, also like to give another thanks to our sponsors, including Agrology.ag, Turton Wine Brokerage, as well as Hefner Insurance and QTech Fire. Thank you very much for supporting these free webinars. Welcome to Adam Koppel, CEO and co-founder of Agrology, and Rick Loka, Assistant Wine Manager from Emeritus Vineyards. Thank you for joining us for this part of our Growing Forward webinar. Would you each introduce yourself for a minute? Rick, why don't we start with you?
So, hi, my name is Rick Loka, Assistant Vineyard Manager here at Emeritus Vineyards. Great to be here today.
Hi, my name is Adam Koppel. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Agrology. We help growers with the challenges and mitigating the challenges and risks of smoke taint, and I'm very excited to be here today.
Thank you both. So, especially recently, fire seasons have been bringing a lot of uncertainty for growers. Riggs, can you tell us a little bit about how you've started to prepare and tackle events and decision making that happens during the growing and harvest season, when you have possible exposures?
Yeah, absolutely. So this all kind of came about for us out here in West County of Sonoma just 2 years ago. So in 2020, that was our first major exposure to a fire incident in a close proximity to what we've got going on. And, there wasn't a lot of data out there that supported the idea of how much smoke can a vineyard take before it smoke taints the wine itself. And, got lucky enough that the following year, early on in 21, met up with the agrology team, and we came up with an idea of how to start testing for smoke, what the air quality does and where we're at with those different levels. And so that has allowed me to work hand in hand with our winemaker, in addition to the wineries that we sell to, on how to create a sustainable or a basic understanding of how much smoke can a vineyard take, especially on a dry farm vineyard like we have. And so it's allowed us to start bringing data together to coincide with those ETS tests that would be coming back and saying, oh, we've got too much smoke in the vineyard versus what we're actually collecting in terms of data that I can pull up on my phone. And so we're creating that data bank to better set, vineyard guys up for success on how much a winery can actually take in terms of smoke damage or smoke exposure. And so that's how we've started to collect that data. And being in our second year, we were able to start figuring out what those differences could be and how we could adapt what we do in the vineyard to best suit what wineries are looking for in terms of their fruit and that sort of thing. And so we got to use that data this last year in how we prioritize where we were going to pick or what things would affect our guys working, in addition to what would be presented to the wineries when we got them into the bins. So hopefully that answers your question. Being a vineyard guy, I can only talk so much in terms of understanding a question.
So you mentioned, prioritizing what to pick. So can you talk a little bit more about what data you used for that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, agrology came out, and we've got multiple different sensors throughout the vineyard, and we were able to see at each sensor how much volatile compounds were hitting in different areas. And so whether it was on a higher point of a ridge or on the bottom part into a swale, we were able to tell exactly where we could pick at a higher priority. So the one that was more exposed, we would like to get the most data out of it. So we were able to pick that a little bit earlier to understand if it was affected as much versus the stuff that was at the top of the hill that may not have been. And so that was where we were able to prioritize here at our winery to figure out exactly what might work and coincide that data that the winery is taking in versus what we have out in the vineyard.
Yeah, and I'll add on here. This was an idea Riggs had, and he told us about it. I thought it was a really clever way to use data from the field that, even in a year when you're not sure if there's going to be a lot of smoke impact, and we did see some smoke move through, you have a limited crew to harvest and pull off the places that are under most threat. Like that's just should be a standard best practice every year for everyone. There's no reason to leave grapes that, are in the most exposed areas and get the lowest air quality on the vines longer than you need to. Pick them first, get them safe, and then go after those grapes that, get more air circulation, airflow around them and are at less risk of smoke taint. So I tell this story a lot when we're talking with our customers and our prospective customers about how you can, use data to drive decision-making. It's an excellent example of how, providing new data sources to growers lets them innovate in the way they do growing and they do cultivation practices and harvesting practices to help mitigate these risks from smoke taint.
So on that topic, you're talking about data points. So what kind of tools do you guys use or do you recommend using for collecting data to make these kinds of decisions?
Sure. So I think I can shoot off first about what types of sensors to use. Like the key thing is that you want to be able to get a sense of when smoke is moving into a vineyard. And that's really critical because today the best approach, the best strategy for handling and mitigating this risk is to know when smoke is there to gather initial baselines because every vineyard has different air quality, just like every vineyard has different exposure and soil types. And a vineyard manager at Pena Vineyard Management said, this is something called airwar. It's the terroir equivalent of the air. And so you can't just, look at the end of season and see what the ETS levels are on your grapes and make a decision about whether or not they've experienced smoke taint. You actually have to know before smoke exposure what those levels were. And so that's why that initial baseline is so critical. And data is a great way to decide when to baseline because you don't have to be out in the field. If that happens in the middle of the night, you can get alerted and know that it's happening. You need to go out and do that baselining. If you're not at the vineyard that day, you can get a notification alert. You need to go and see that. And so that's a really critical way to use that data is to just get that initial baseline. And from there, a couple weeks later, a nice follow-up test to see if there's been a shift in levels in the grapes. And then ideally, there won't have been a shift, so you can sit there and rest easy. And then data can give you the confidence to harvest at the end of the year. If there's no more exposure, and you know that exposure event you experienced didn't cause any problems in the grapes, you're clear to harvest as usual. And that's the kind of great outcome we like to see and that we like to help our customers with. And then anybody who's using data in combination with testing can achieve.
So, Riggs, did you have sensors placed in multiple areas of the vineyards, or how did that?
Yeah, so our property is on two sides of a highway, and we have a afternoon wind that comes from the west, brings in the fog for us, and so we placed most of our sensors on the east side of the highway, and that allowed us to gather the data for that specific area. So there's 30 acres of the 110 that we have that we've intensified those sensors on just to get a better understanding of what kind of airflow is happening, how much moisture is getting in there, where the smoke might be sitting. Knock on some wood, this last year, we didn't have a whole lot of smoke exposure, especially at our major, our main ranch here in Sebastopol. And so we got really lucky on that end. But then on the south end of town, there was a 10-acre fire all of 15 minutes away, and the smoke actually had wrapped back around. And so we were able to take that data and say at the top of the hill, that's where the smoke got to. And then it finally settled down into the bottom. So you can watch that data kind of build up through the sensor and what data that we have. And so that's where we were able to kind of push that forward and say, okay, this is what we know. And this gave us a good baseline for what we could affect this year. How can we continually change what we're going to do to make sure that we're providing the best grapes we possibly can.
Yep. Yeah. And a key thing about a year, when there isn't any serious smoke impact is that's still a really valuable data point to put into, a data portfolio or a data library. There's a lot of value in saying that, this is what the air looked like in a perfectly fine year when there were great grapes. Because then if there's a questionable year, you can compare back to that data and say, does this look riskier or less risky? And you can communicate that across the entire value chain up to maybe wineries or anyone who's interested in it. And that's how I think as an industry, we overcome this challenge by partnering around gathering the data, sharing it, and fostering understanding of what smoke risk really is. Because we don't want to be in a position where grapes are refused because there was a smoky day. Like that is just that is not how we should operate. And that's how you waste production and you waste trust and ruin relationships.
Yeah, Adam, I know that you guys you collect a lot of data and you actually put out a report like at the end of the season that people can compare to and use as like a baseline, right? Can you show us some of that?
Yeah, sure. I'll show it up. I'll caveat though, you can't really use it as a baseline because it's aggregated across a lot of properties. We don't share individual customers' data. Our customers control it. They will let us do some high-level aggregation to help the industry as a whole because they, believe in this industry and live it. So I do want to say that this is just to give people a sense of what the year looks like, but it's not applicable to an individual vineyard. But I'm going to go ahead and pull that up now. All right. So here we're looking at some of the output from our smoke exposure report for 2021. Like I mentioned, this is aggregated data from multiple locations across Napa. So it's not really applicable to a specific location, but more for the entire region. And what I'd highlight here is, first of all, it's not just one type of data. To really understand the risk of smoke exposure, you want to look at VOC data, and you want to look at PM1 data, and you want to look at it in the vineyard. So you can't just look at an air quality indicator or air quality index from a weather station that's 10 miles away. That's not telling you what's happening in your vines. And so this is the key thing about PM1 is it's a good indicator of smoke presence in the vineyard, and the VOC content is actually what causes the smoke taint. So these are the two key things to track. And I've highlighted here on this chart for Napa 3 kind of smoke exposure events when we were very confident that there was smoke coming into a lot of the vineyards in Napa that we work with. And I'll show you why, we have that level of confidence, but you see kind of these long sustained elevations in PM, which is the yellow line here. The other thing I'd emphasize is there's not a lot of corresponding increase in VOC with these events. And that's a good thing because that means the smoke is low risk smoke that doesn't have the VOC content necessary to drive smoke taint. And so then moving on over here to Sonoma now, we see, pretty similar curves, slightly lower maximum levels of exposure, but still, the same basic timing of these events. And that's another thing to notice here. It's important that, these events were triggered by large scale smoke impact, not, localized fires where the smoke is fresh, but by, larger fire and weather systems across California. And, the dates that I'd highlight are, around, I think, 8/19, 8/26 or 8/27, and 9/5. And then we're going to go take a look at what that looks like from satellite imagery that we pull to verify what's happening on the ground. And so moving here, we're first going to start off with what a clear, beautiful sky looks like in Northern California. I've put S and N on the map there just to help people understand where Sonoma and Napa are roughly. And you can see here in this one, there's some maybe some slight indications of wildfires up way to the north and to the east, but not a lot of issues in the sky. Moving on into the time of impact, however, we see here on 8/19, smoke streaming from many wildfires towards Sonoma and Napa. And this is when we began to study that, the impact of this first events. I've gone ahead and flagged the location of these wildfire sites with red Fs to correspond to the fires. And you'll see the plumes of smoke drifting out over, and they're all actually headed basically directly at wine country, which is unfortunate. However, these fires were, hundreds of miles away. The smoke had time to essentially to have the VOCs in content in it neutralize. And that's why we didn't see a corresponding increase in VOCs as the PM content of the smoke arrived. Still a great time to do baselining. We're still, of course, learning what risky smoke looks like exactly. But I will highlight that seeing this kind of thing also gave us the confidence to identify low risk smoke, which is a wonderful thing to know, because then when we see it happening and people in the industry start asking, that we see smoke in the valley, we see smoke in the vineyards, what's going on here? Being able to say, yeah, there's definitely smoke, but it's low risk smoke is a nice confidence builder for the industry. So moving on to from 819 to 827, further on, again, we're seeing, the plumes coming from similar number of fires. Thankfully, Cal Fire, you can see, has knocked down some of these fires, which is great. As the season went on, we're seeing less of these. But again, these are very large fires that are distant, that are driving big disruptions to the air accordingly. But that smoke, being distant smoke, is low risk smoke. Moving along further in the season, on to 9.5, which is the last one we're taking here. Here, this is an interesting one because by this point, the winds have shifted and we're seeing the smoke plumes moving mostly away from Napa and Sonoma. But we did also see some smoke kind of come and wrap down along the coast there. And we did see some effect more in Sonoma than Napa at this 9.5 data. You can just see a little bit of smoke there along, the Northern California coast that definitely presented some risk to coastal vineyards. And so this is why, it's so important to look at local data as opposed to large scale data, because what's happening here is not necessarily going to tell you what's going on in your specific vineyard. And you just can't beat gathering data on the ground from your vineyard to understand the risk of exposure. And like we talked about earlier, it's best to do that early, because if you can see what a good year looks like, you'll have that in your data portfolio or your data library to understand your level of risk in the future. And correlate that and build up, not only your understanding, but as hopefully collaborate with academics, the industry's understanding of what the smoke taint risk factors are and how to handle it.
Thanks, Adam. That's very interesting. Rick, so you have now some experience and you have gathered some data over time now. Do you have like a plan of action when you see different data points come in that you use to make decisions along the way?
I think the majority of your question goes back to the idea of how can we better protect the vineyard workers that are out there when the fires are actually happening. And that was something that I utilized the app religiously because, you'd watch the news first thing in the morning and it would say one thing, but in terms of how we design what we can do for the guys, we don't want the guys to be out there in the worst of it. When it was 2020 and that the Walbridge fire happened, we were picking grapes that night. We watched the lightning hit the Occidental Hills and kind of wrap to the north of us. And we pulled the guys. And so that was one of those things where you got to create the safest environment for those guys because they're the ones that are working the hardest to make it happen. And so can we do things to adjust what we're trying to do in the vineyard? Building the data is going to take a lot of time to be able to enhance even the simplest decisions. And so just having this data to start building that plan, I think that's what's going to set us up for the most success, especially out here in the industry when wildfires are going to always happen, no matter what we want and how that's going to work out. But just trying to keep an eye on what's happening at those sensors that gives us a real-time data that allows me to adjust where I'm going to have those guys at. If I know that there's a breeze coming in, I can be able to put them up on a higher elevation area where it may be a little bit easier for them to breathe and be able to work and what they need to do. But kind of going forward, we're always going to be looking at the data and how can we change this to make it better for our vineyard workers, in addition to how can we make it better for the grapes as they continue to grow and size up and change color and be ready to be harvested.
Yeah, I think, we also, and we've talked with rigs, we've talked with other vineyards and wineries we work with around, making plans before the smoke hits. And I think that's really important because it lets you be strategic about things instead of just reactive. And so maybe the best advice is before smoke season or, before you see wildfire smoke, it's always good to check your insurance and get an understanding of what type of coverage you have and what sort of data you need to provide to trigger that coverage so you can be ready to get it if you get hit really bad. And, nobody wants that to happen, but insurance there, of course, to protect you. We talked a little about maybe, you have kind of a plan A, plan B, plan C, and plan D an approach where plan A, hopefully you have a data set that shows you it's a normal year. And then you can just kind of go business as usual. And of course, to know it's a normal year, you need to have that data library or data portfolio so you can compare back in the past and you can be confident. If if you haven't seen anything crazy in the data set, it's, it doesn't matter what people said about a wildfire year or how many wildfires there were. If your vineyard wasn't hit, by all means, go ahead, harvest and make wine as usual. You don't have anything to worry about. And that's really kind of the best scenario. And what we want to do is, to help people have that confidence to go forward with those decisions. But, unfortunately, if you start to see things that are indicative of problems, like a lot of smoke in the vineyard, maybe some ETS tests coming back that are, a little worrisome. Plan B can be to get creative with wines. And, I always like to highlight this, that, Meredith makes a white Pinot. It's an exceptional wine. It also could be a really good strategy to maybe harvest some of those Pinot grapes a little earlier if you're worried, reduce the skin contact, and make a slightly different product to adapt to what the season's looking like. If you're a larger grower or a larger winery and you have multiple labels, maybe some of those labels are produced in larger volume. And you can move some grapes around in that in the labels and move impacted grapes into more of a bulk product, where if there is any smoke issue, it's not going to destroy the product. And you can still realize value on a winery owned label as opposed to selling into bulk market. But you can also protect the brand by not putting tainted grapes into a really premium wine. And I think a great strategy may be, if you have a larger volume product and you put some of your tainted wines in there from a premium vineyard, then maybe that's a select edition of the wine because it has a higher concentration of premium grapes. Like there's some creative and clever things you can do there that are great if you have that flexibility with labels with different size volume. Plan C may be, you should go out and look at the bulk market, because there will be buyers of grapes who are producing in such volume that smoke isn't going to cause any trouble. And if you're selling some really high quality grapes to them, maybe it's going to even improve that bulk product. So you're kind of doing them a favor. And that's a good option to have. But to do that, you're probably going to want to see if you can, talk through those relationships early and have that, option ready to go, so you're not panicking. And then finally, plan D may be, if it just looks pretty grim, that's when it's time to look at insurance. But I think, insurance really should be kind of a last resort, because you don't want to drive up your premiums, but also, everyone's invested in these grapes and the harvest. It'd be nice to see something come of them. Nice to deliver wine to consumers in one of these strategies. So I think identifying this sort of plan process is great. Over time, as you build up your data library, you can go and start saying, based on data, will trigger going from A to B, B to C, C to D, and so forth. But the key thing is starting off with that data and starting early, so you can make these informed and strategic decisions.
Yeah, building on that and what you said earlier about how not having everything ruined by having one smoky day if there's not a real impact. Riggs, have you been able to take some of this data you have and use that in conversations with winemakers to reassure them about the quality of the grapes?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the biggest things that I can be able to do is having the data available at any point in time. I can pull it up and say, this is what we've got going on in the vineyard. This is what I know in terms of our baseline. I think, kind of bouncing off of what Adam just brought up, B and C are those middle of the road, figure it out kind of things. But, one of the biggest things that I can push forward is make sure that you have an open conversation with your grape buyers. If you are trying to hide the idea that you have a smoke tainted vineyard, but you still want to force those grapes through, you want to make sure that you have an open conversation that shows that, you have the data that says and supports this is still a very, very good product, and you can make great wines out of it. And so that's kind of the open-ended thing of it. I've had multiple conversations with a lot of different wineries, and a lot of wineries are looking at the ETS data, and they don't have the vineyard data. They just have the ETS data from sampling in comparison to what I have. And so trying to bring those together has been a great conversation piece, and it allows us to make sure that we're both on the same page, knowing that we can come up and make a great product.
And then I guess you can use all that data post-season, carrying into next season, building your portfolio over time, and maybe having a history of matching your vineyard data to your ETS or lab data.
Absolutely. That's something that here at Emeritus I'm working hand in hand with our winemaking team to make sure that we're creating a data pile that works best for all parties involved. And so, that's kind of the fun thing that we come in the winter when it's a rainy day and they're not doing a whole lot because the wine finally made it to barrel, and I'm not doing a whole lot because it's raining outside. So we sit there and we look at data together and come up with a plan on, where are the next steps that we can take to make sure that we're making the best wine possible.
Great. Adam, I know you're a little bit of a data nerd, right? And I think you have some visions about, once we have enough data, what we could do with this in the future, right? Is that something you want to share a little bit about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key thing here is we've already heard from Dr. Anita, and the one of the most important things that anyone who's gathering data can do beyond just informing their own strategies is they can take the opportunity to share it with the researchers at Davis and at other universities that are working to beat back this problem for the industry, to understand it and develop better solutions. So, for what we're trying to do here, by combining, the data we've gathered with the ETS results from our customers and the results of micro-ferments, we'd like to be able to just give people a risk index from the data we're gathering in the air of the vineyards to really help them nail down what they need to do. Instead of just saying, here's a smoke coming through, we can say by working with their data portfolios and their data libraries and the lab test results they have with a lot of confidence how risky, how much risk they're facing for smoke taint. And the way we can do that is with data collection, partnerships, and machine learning. And those are the kind of the core things we try and do. But the other thing I really, really want to emphasize is the way we can all do this together is by, to the best of our abilities, sharing data out to the researchers and the academics. We're trying to get a really holistic understanding of, and developing the models of what causes smoke taint. And of course, once we have that, then we can also start figuring out what we can do to mitigate it in the field and how to do these strategies. But they'll tell you the thing that's going to make it possible is the data. Without data, we can't do anything because we're just taking shots in the dark. Because everyone knows waiting for a lab test and to come back to make decisions is excruciating. It'd be much nicer just to be able to pull out something on your phone or look at a quick report that's generated. And so we want to go in that direction. But the big thing is really just making sure that we can all, the best of our abilities, share the data that's possible to share to build up the industry's understanding.
Great. So, Riggs, before we finish up here, do you have a few key takeaways you want to tell vineyard growers out there, saying, hey, if you don't have a plan yet, these are the key things you should be thinking of?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think the biggest thing that you guys can all take away from this is data is key, whether you want to admit it or not. A lot of our vineyard people are older in age. They don't like technology nearly as much. I know that from my dad. My dad's been doing this for 42 years now. He doesn't like technology. And so it's one of those things you've got to be able to support yourself as a vineyard guy, but wineries need to be willing to listen and understand that, data is going to be the saving grace in all of this, especially if things are based off of chemistry and points and math. We want to make sure that, vineyards are taken care of because that's what produces the best wine out there. So, the biggest thing is make sure that you have an open conversation line. If you're selling grapes, you want to make sure that winery knows that you're doing your due diligence to make sure that they're getting the best product. And then winemakers, make sure that you're paying attention to what those vineyard guys are saying, so you don't come back and try and accuse them of something that isn't true.
Adam, do you have anything you want to lay on to Rick's comments about using the data for these decisions?
Yeah, I think it's really great to have that data library, that data portfolio that goes back because being able to understand every year how that contributes to the outcomes in the grapes and the wine is really critical. And seeing what a good, safe year looks like is a really wonderful thing because it's going to give you confidence in the future. The thing I'll say about data of smoke risk in the vineyard is to understanding and making it a part of vineyard processes, because unfortunately this problem doesn't look like it's going away. And so that's the best approach. And then, like I said earlier, the more people can share data with the researchers who are tackling this problem and building up understanding, the better off we'll all be sooner. So those are the two things I take away. Gather that data and share it if you can.
And Riggs, I know that you guys also, look at the final product, right, and see how it matches up with the data.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, just a quick talking point, it's the idea that, I can carry the data as much as I possibly can. You can pull the sample the day before and you can get that back from ETS, but then you've got to go and taste those wines once you finally got them in the bottle. 9 times out of 10, it's all based off of taste anyway. That's how winemakers work, and especially the consumers. And so the data will only help enhance the idea of how to collect all of that stuff. So we make sure that we're producing the best product available to consumers. And that's that rainy summer, that rainy winter day. Luckily we get the opportunity to get out of the tank and before it goes into barrel, because barrels have a toast to them depending on what's going on there. And that's something that, you can try and change or you can go with. You just have to take those checks and balances and see how they work out for you. Every winery is different, but making sure that we test that final project is the best opportunity to complete that entire portfolio data.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Riggs, Adams, for joining us here, sharing your insights and your experience for this tough issue. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes the second webinar in the 2022 Growing Forward webinar series. I'd like to thank everybody who watched with us, participated in the live chat, and of course, our speakers, Anita Oberholster, Adam Koble, and Riggs Loga. The next episode of Growing Forward will be broadcast in November. But before that, we have the Wine Industry Sales Symposium on August 24th, which will also be virtual. And of course, we have the North Coast Wine Industry Expo coming up on December 1st. So hope we'll see you there in Santa Rosa. Before we conclude, a final thank you to our sponsors, Agrology.ag, Turrentine Wine Brokers, as well as Hefner Insurance Brokers and QTech Fire. Thank you. See you all soon.